Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with a very special guest, Conor Gallagher, who I've got to read his biography because he's the CEO of multiple things with a huge list of accomplishments. I want to make sure I don't get it wrong. But first and foremost, Conor, thanks for coming on today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Kennedy. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. So, Conor is the CEO of multiple businesses, including Well Ordered Family, which we're going to talk about today. He's got a book to help families, and most of his corpus is in that milieu, which is very excellent. Goodwill Publishers, and TAN Books. He's the executive director of the Benedict Leadership Institute at Belmont Abbey College, where he serves on the board of trustees. Apparently, our friend here has no free time because he's got 47 things to do all the time. He's also a board member at St. Joseph's College Seminary in Mount Holly, North Carolina. By the way, did the hurricane affect you at all?
Yeah, a little bit in my area. The main brunt of it was about an hour north, and that's Asheville. And you probably heard Asheville, North Carolina got hammered. That's where my wife's from. Her mother still works up there. So we're very familiar with there all the time. And man, they got pommeled bad.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank God that you guys didn't get it too hard, but a lot of people definitely did suffer from that. So that was no good. Yeah. And his books include If Aristotle's Kid Had an iPod, Ancient Wisdom for Modern Parents, Still Amidst the Storm, A Family Man's Search for Peace in an Anxious World, Parenting for Eternity, which I know personally is a very good book, You Are Never Too Busy, You Have Only One Problem, and Well Ordered Family. He and his wife, Ashley, are parents to, listen to this, 16 children and live near Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'll have the links for all of his work underneath the show. And today we're going to be talking about his book. And not just a book, it's actually sort of a system to help families called Well Ordered Family, which I'll just bring up on the screen here. And you can see.
Well, I'll tell you this first, Kennedy, I got to tell you, the Parenting for Eternity, you said it's a good book.
Yeah.
Your book, Terror of Demons, is the only book cited in my book that's not by a dead saint. So, wow. Maybe that's a premonition that you're going to be a dead saint one day, but everyone else is, St. Francis de Sales, whatever, and, Therese of Lisieux, blah, 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 and then Kennedy Hall.
Well, I don't know if my audience knows the story, but I had originally self-published Terror of Demons just on a lark, and it did very well. Excuse me, I'm dealing with a little chest cold. But then it found its way into your hands through a mutual friend. And then I got a call, and TAN Books wanted to publish it. And I said, great, why not? I'd never thought in a million years I'd actually, get with someone legitimate. And so that's very high praise. It may be a sign something good for me in the future, or it may be a sign that was the one mistake you put into your book, but time will tell, I guess.
But I had to give you props for that, man, because,
well, thank you.
All the saints and Kennedy,
There you go. Well, here you go. All right. So let's just check out this quickly here. So we're talking about Well Ordered Family, which is a book, but it's also a whole sort of system. And so you can see here on the website, I'll link this underneath. But we're going to talk about everything that's involved in this here. I just want to show you the website, but there's pillars to the system, the metrics, the vision, the unity, relationships, and so forth. And I've gone through a lot of this information, and it's really strong. And I got to tell you, as someone who is, I'm 36, 6 children, God willing, there'll be more. And it's very difficult to raise a family. It's very rewarding and but it's very challenging. And especially with the technology and the homeschooling and the crisis, let's be honest, in both the church and society. I mean, there's a lot of things that are very difficult to deal with. So I thank you for doing this, because I think this is very helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you. It is. It's an age of rubbish, and we're confronted with chaos, whether it's in church or politics or media or wherever it is. And, Kennedy, those are sometimes we can kind of think that those are just distant things that we just sit around and complain about. But, I found, as you probably have, like, it enters into your daily life. Yeah. But the problem is like, after you complain about all these things, church, politics, whatever, the next morning you have to wake up and still raise your family. So complaining sometimes doesn't help. We got to just go and live differently. And so this is my attempt to say, okay, what's the order and structure I can bring to this chaos and kind of keep the barbarians at the gate and form my little bubble, my little environment to where, we're still in the world, but not of the world, and raise saints. And so that's, but I found Aquinas, I love talking on Catholic shows because I can kind of let my, my little Catholic stuff out more. Aquinas said that grace builds on nature, as you will know. And so, the sacraments, the prayer life, the devotions of the church, they're just glorious. The traditions of the church are just glorious. And by the way, throwing yourself into the traditions of the church, it's almost like being a convert again if you were raised in, the modern church like I was. And, but, God requires us to still build upon nature and like the systems and structure of our day-to-day rhythm of life, is that nature. And I have found that the grace from the sacraments, from the church, from the devotions, all of that from the liturgy, all of that spills on our family more like a tsunami when the natural order is taken care of.
Yeah.
And so this is like TAN has a billion things about that grace, and this is a little bit more like the natural side of things. And we've lost that. Our society has become so unnatural, so contra nature. It's disordered. And so this is my attempt to kind of reclaim some of that natural order so that the grace of Holy Mother Church can just spill in us. But we have to become that receptive vessel. So anyway, you understand what I'm saying.
No, that's great. And I want to just jump on that because, excuse me, because, in my book, Terror of Demons, one of the things that I harp on is honestly just a lot of things that I learned actually not from Catholic apologists and writers. A lot of it was from like retired military men and, just the habits that they have. A lot of it was from my career as an athlete, football and rugby and boxing and just all the sort of disciplinary things. Now, when I say career, I didn't make any money. I just mean, playing for years. But because, our church has essentially baptized the tradition of antiquity, coming from the academies under Plato and Aristotle and Socrates and so forth. And of course, they didn't have the light of revelation. But when we look, the reason why that way of thought the reason why it could be baptized is because on the natural level, it was with nature. The academy in the ancient world would train the body, it would train the mind, it would train the artistic sensibilities, it would train the rhetorical sensibilities, the logical sensibilities, and of course the religion was flawed. Nonetheless, from the natural level, they understood the necessity for piety for the growth in virtue. And this is something, quite frankly, that is sorely lacking. I'm sort of an entrepreneur now. You obviously have a lot of business experience. The world of self-help books and all these things, there's some good in it, but it's also it's infuriating at times because there's these guys with these great principles, and then all of a sudden they go into some weird, basically Gnosticism or something about, the will to power, whatever it is. They go into these weird things. So I think this is a welcome addition to the world of Catholic literature to help us with those practical steps. Would you say that that's one of the motivations behind why you produce this?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's build on kind of the secular world out there a little bit. So if you think of mixed martial arts, which I used to do a lot of, you go the beauty of mixed martial arts, which is kind of a new phenomenon. Everyone used to be so stuck in one particular discipline, but pulling from grappling, pulling from boxing, pulling from a kicking art or something, and putting it all together kind of makes the ultimate fighter. And that's that mixed martial. All I'm saying is that I learned that to raise my family, I can pull from these disciplines that corporate America has really perfected. I mean, corporate America is darn good at picking a vision, building a team around that vision, hitting their metrics, coming up with a scorecard to determine what the milestones of success are, et cetera, et cetera. They're really good at it. Now, they do a lot of evil things with that, as we know. But that doesn't mean there's not something really good to learn from it. Like, that's why I love looking at guys like David Goggins, who's maybe a little crazy, but he actually knows a lot about what it takes to become a saint. I mean, his ability of self-denial, it's misdirected. We know, but it's incredible the discipline he has. St. Francis of Assisi had that level of discipline. It was just directed in a different way. So I want to take that self-discipline that big corporate executives have and apply some of that, not just to my business and the businesses that I run, but take just enough from it to bring order and clarity into my family life.
Well, one of the saints, although I think he's blessed. I think Gabriel Garcia Moreno. I think he's blessed, if not venerable. But he was the president of Ecuador, and he was assassinated by the Freemasons. One of those things that sounds like a conspiracy, but it's not. And but if you read his rule of life, it kind of sounds like the daily routine of one of those modern. Obviously, it's perfectly religious, and he has everything in the right order. But the sort of time stamps on when he was going to do things and for how long and in what order. It almost sounds like one of those, morning routines of one of those influencer guys telling you how to make $1 million or whatever. But the point is that he had his natural virtue so dialed in the proper context and order that then his nature, there was more to build upon. And, we always like to say, as you said, grace builds on nature, but you have to give it the nature to build on. You can't just say, exactly right. I'm a slob in a ditch right now. Grace will build on my nature. Well, there is no nature. So you're going to have to build that nature at the same time.
I love it. My dad always said, son, God will feed the birds of the air, but he ain't going to put the food in the nest. You got to go out there and get it, So, but you think of like a rule of life, like the Benedictine tradition.
Yeah.
Benedict, he made this incredible daily routine around the hours and everything. So there's a lot to learn from all of that. And I particularly found that this system I've created resonates with men who spend their day in some kind of business setting, and they're on their A game at work, Kennedy, right? They're out there, they're working hard. They need to impress their boss, their colleagues, their customers. And then they come home and they're demasculated and they're just waiting to be told what to do. And their spouses never actually see them on their A game because, and that relates to me too. Like I experienced that. I was kind of the man at work growing these businesses, and I go home and it's my wife's domain in a lot of ways. She's been running it all day. She's got all the kids. She's homeschooling. And I go home and I'm like, what do I do now? So, and it wasn't so much even like the structure of the family issue. I mean, that's always something men have to contend with, but it was really like, I want my wife to see what I'm really good at, because I'm really good at work. And I kind of want her to see me on my A game. And so I would come home and say, you know what, let's reassess our vision. And I brought these skills home, and it's helped me just even with my relationship with my wife, when she sees me stepping into this leadership role that I know how to do at work. And so it's helped in a lot of ways.
All right. So let's jump off of that. And because in your book, you talk about the 6 components of the well-ordered family management system. Why don't you break those down? Not too much, because I want people to buy the book, but give us a taste.
All right. So number 1 is vision. And I love this because when you think of vision, don't think of sight. And I went back to the Oxford English Dictionary, the big 13-volume one. A visionary is one who sees that which is not there. It's like an apparition. It's actually in the dictionary. It says it's a visionary is one who has an apparition. It's a mystical visionary, seeing something that's not there. And I love that definition of a CEO is like a visionary, and I love that title that you can use as a boss. And I'm sitting here saying at home, we need to be visionaries and create a very crystal clear idea of where we're trying to take our family. What does that mean in terms of faith, in terms of finances, in terms of health and fitness, whatever it is, but get really crystal clear on the purpose that God made the Gallagher family, gave me all these kids for some particular reason. And I have to learn how to see that and articulate that. And just like in business, I got my vision statement for TAN all over the walls out there in the hallway. And now I have it on my wall at my house, and I can point to it. And that, my kids are learning the reason we're doing small little things is because we're trying to accomplish that vision. So that's the first step. And that's also where I usually say vision is where you learn, Kennedy, to work on your family, not just in your family. And we talk about that with work. Got to work on your business, not just in your business. Well, we have to work on our families, not just in our families. So that's why I created group coaching for families. So mom and dad come together, they participate in a virtual group coaching session, and they spend some time separating themselves from the little rugrats, get away from the kids, and answer some of these questions that I've come up with to help you create this vision. So that's part 1. Vision. Jim Collins, perhaps the greatest business mind and author of the last 50 years, he said, a successful company is 1% vision, 99% alignment around that vision. And so that's my second part, unity. So you can have a great vision statement, a mission statement, whatever for your business, but if you don't have alignment or unity around that, and your team is kind of, falling apart, you ain't going to succeed. Same thing with the family. So unity comes down to family meetings, a certain cadence of meetings where we get together and we pray and we discuss certain things. I try to bring the teenagers more into the fold to kind of help let them see how we're trying to envision this family. What are our goals for this quarter? We have quarterly goals, just like I do at work. And like every Sunday night, Kennedy, we have a little family meeting. It sounds like some big thing, but it's not. But it's the only time you'll hear me say, get out your cell phones. I will everybody get their cell phone out, because we have to talk about the logistics of this coming week. What sports practices are there? What school events are there? Am I traveling for work? What doctor appointments? I just need to know everything going on. My wife needs to hear my schedule. And so I always discover something Sunday night, preparing ourselves for this next week. Because it's usually not like, you might have experienced this. It's not like the stress of, oh, there's something we have to do Wednesday night. It's the fact that we didn't talk about it and prepare for it. And it's a surprise. Like, surprise creates stress, right?
Yeah.
So the unity part 2 of this helps that kind of thing.
Let me just add something there too, because you reminded me.
Yeah.
Good inspirational family that my wife and I look up to. They have 13 children. They're dairy farmers, and very successful and very faithful Catholics, very successful farmers, and most importantly, though, extremely successful family. And you have your Sunday night meeting, and one thing that they taught us, and our children are still really young. Our oldest is nine. Our oldest of 6 is 9 years old. So we're just kind of getting into that era of, we're a little busy. We're just getting into that place of, like our oldest boys play house league hockey. It's not a big deal, but one of them's got confirmation coming up, and then I got my third order meetings. I got to travel, and we've got whatever Eucharistic Crusade on Saturday. We got all these things going on. Not a ton, but we're kind of getting there. So we're talking to this family, dairy farm, 100 and something cows, 13 children, all these things. And every Monday night, they would have their meeting, and they would sit around the table in the kitchen, and they would sit there, and it's like sacrosanct. It's like, if you live at this house, or if you live at the farm across the road and work on that farm, doesn't matter if you're 40 years old, it's sacrosanct every Monday night you're here. And that's something extremely practical and useful.
I love it. That's exactly right. I mean, every other institution has meetings, and in sports, we call it practice. And if you're in a symphony or something, it's rehearsal. We need meetings in our family. We need to get together and discuss some of the logistics, especially as those activities, Kennedy, as your kids get older, more teenagers, they're driving, it just gets out of control. So meetings pulls everybody on the same page. So part 3 is systems, and systems is a couple things. One, I talk about macro systems and micro systems. Macro systems are, think about like the Benedict Option by Rod Dreher, which you're probably familiar with, right? Yep. You have to be intentional and create your environments. You have to say, what is the social environment of my kids? What's the technological environment of my kids? Who are they interacting with? What games are they participating in? All these things. It's in the order to get, the trickier it gets, What's the religious environment? Are you getting fed at your parish or not?
Yeah.
What's your educational environment? Are you in public school, private school, homeschool, co-ops, hybrids? You have to look at it like a little business unit and say, what are the pros and cons and good things, bad things here? And then, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's the professional environment. So your job, maybe your spouse's job, part-time job. And then when your kids start working, like my kid just starts working at the bagel shop down the street. It's a whole new world like that my kid is having to contend with. My point on the systems, Kennedy, I like to say, particularly fathers, you need to see yourself. You need to identify all this identification people do these days, but you need to identify as the architect of your family. You must build the environments, the structure. You cannot outsource this to some other expert. You're the architect. You have to look at all the raw material around you and be intentional and not be a victim of your circumstances. You got to man up, take ownership of it, and start constructing the social environment of your kids. And if you don't like what they're doing, you can change it. You are empowered, to use silly modern language. You are empowered to change it. You can make those changes. You can get control of the technology in your house. So these are all systems. And then there's micro systems, Kennedy, where it's like how to get the chores done, how to do the yard work, that kind of stuff people always want to know. And so I have tools in there. That's part 3. Now part 4 is metrics. The simple point on this, anytime you get really serious about anything in life, whether it's fitness, health, or becoming a saint, becoming rich, whatever it is you get serious about, you start to measure things with precision. I mean, Ignatius of Loyola came up with this tick mark system where he was trying to overcome vices, and he carried around a little piece of paper in his pocket, and he would examine his conscience 2 or 3 or 4 times a day and tick off anytime he had a lustful thought, anytime he had a wrathful moment, he was angry at somebody, anytime he was impatient, he would tick, 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 tick. He was keeping a scorecard.
Yeah.
And so any athlete shows us, anybody who accomplishes something great, when they get serious, they start measuring. I'm not going to tell you what to measure in your family. Yours is different from mine. Everybody's is different. But what I'm saying is if you want to take your family life super seriously, you're going to start to measure certain things in certain ways. How many times a week do you pray together as a family? How, like on our scorecard, we have a goal to get all of our kids to confession once a month. Mm-hmm. And recently I was reading a TAN booklet called The Secrets of Confession. And after reading this again, after like another 10 years went by, I said, I think we need to go to confession once a week. I think we need to take another level, and maybe I'll say every 2 weeks, and maybe that'll be on my scorecard next to just kind of, but it's something that I think is becoming more and more and more important in my family, is starting to rotate my week around going to confession with all the kids. So that's a scorecard metric, mm-hmm. Screen time, debt payment, whatever these things that you need to measure. So that's metrics. And we can go on to relationships and discernment, but that's systems and metrics.
I'll talk about metrics for a sec, because it is true, basically in every aspect of life where we want to see growth, or you want to see improvement or progress, you're going to measure. And it's, my wife and I, years ago, we've kind of had to, we were not practicing Catholics growing up. We were both baptized as Catholics, but we discovered the faith on our own, basically just after we were married, in our mid-20s. So we were kind of in this position where, it's by the seat of our pants. What are we doing? And I say that in Terror of Demons at the beginning. I say one of the reasons I wrote the book is because I wanted to have a book like that, but I couldn't find one when I was trying to figure out the things I had to figure out. And, I grew up, playing football and had one amazing coach. He was our offensive line coach. And when I was in high school, we had a very strong program. Canada's not known as much for its football as it is for its hockey, but we actually do have some pretty serious programs, and we have a professional league and stuff. So I was in a pretty serious program, and every Monday, unless we had a Wednesday game, but if it was a Thursday or Friday, every Monday after practice, or Sunday night, we had to go in Sunday nights to the school. We'd sit and watch film, and he had a score sheet of the whole offensive line with like the name and the amount of plays beside it, and we got a score on if we did our job on every game. And if we didn't get over 90%, we had to do a bunch of push-ups and things like that. And we were very good. We didn't allow one sack in my entire senior year because we had this metric system and it was clear. And, my wife and I, when we were just a few years into marriage, we were like, we should probably figure out all these financial things. So I read the Dave Ramsey thing and I did the whole system or whatever. And it was like, oh, if I just write it down and I just kind of have a metric system, it's amazing how that works. So it makes perfect sense that this would apply to everything else in life.
Perfect, man. You nailed it. That's it. And, part of the reasons that we offer this group coaching, Kennedy, is people need help with this. I mean, this is why, like the Dave Ramsey stuff, they have so many coaches and everything. A lot of people just need that accountability. Like, it's, so I was a lot fatter than I am now. I was up at 240, and I shouldn't be 240. I should be 195 or something. But I got type 2 diabetes, and I was just overrun with work and just kind of stressed out. And my doctor said, "Hey, why don't you get on Ozempic?" And my wife is like, "Bull crap, you ain't doing that. You need to just start controlling what you put in your face." So, I actually hired a dietitian. And and I was like, this is dumb. Like, I know what to eat, blah, blah, blah. And I realized I really wasn't paying for knowledge. I was paying for accountability.
Yes.
And I've been with him for 4 months, and I've lost a freaking ton of weight and gained muscle, which is hard to do.
Yeah.
It's a lot of success. And I had an appointment with him this morning, and every 2 weeks I meet with him, and I step on this in-body scanner that like measures your water in your body, your muscle in your body, your fat in your body. Anyway, I'm paying for accountability because I just need that. And some people, and I'm trying to provide that same kind of coaching service to families who kind of need that accountability as well.
Well, when you like, money's a dirty word, and sometimes in the Catholic sphere, because it's like, well, what are we trying to make money off Catholicism? It's like, no, listen, when Christ tells us we can't serve two masters, it doesn't just mean, obviously it means that we don't serve the money, but it also means we can't be attached to it. So when we put a little skin in the game, we end up following through. This is just a human psychological trait. If you give somebody $100 a month because you want to sign up, like I have my Substack, okay, I give stuff away for free. I have stuff behind a paywall, but because it's behind a paywall, for one, I show up because I'm paid to show up, and secondly, the people who pay to sign up, they always come to the Substack because they want to, and we both benefit. If I was to offer a free set of courses on the French Revolution or something like that, and it was totally free, yeah, some people would sign in, but if they could, they would, and if they wouldn't, who cares? If they paid, $100 for, 4 sessions or something, I bet you they'd all sign up, they'd all show up, and they would benefit from it. And this is just something people have to understand. Sometimes you do have to shell out a few shekels, not for the sake. The money side is almost a secondary. It's the psychological side of, I've put some skin in the game. Now I have to follow through.
Well, yeah, I mean, and actually, from a macro standpoint, that's exactly the problem with socialism. Yeah. But I love that. You're exactly right, and that's why we have that group coaching. So that's systems and metrics. What about relationships? So, family life would be really easy if it wasn't for all the people involved, right? So, relationships are hard. Now, what I've done in this part, Kennedy, is at work, like in the 60s, 70s, like maybe one good thing came out of the 60s, and it was the idea that employers should try to assess their employees and find out what their natural God-given strengths are and put them in positions to succeed rather than just like forcing them to fix all their weaknesses, because trying to fix all the weaknesses at work, it doesn't work very well. Like, why try to make an offensive lineman a running back? It just never, it's not necessarily. So, and that, yes, like maybe this is why the dumbest, stupidest, most incorrect statement that I ever hear people say is like the 4th grade teacher line of, you can do anything if you put your mind to it.
No, you can't.
Just like,
no, you
just
can't.
So stupid. Why do you say it? It's just so patently dumb. But so at work, before we hire somebody, we administer five different assessment tests. Most of them are free. Some of them cost a little bit of money, but we do these assessment tests. First of all, people enjoy doing it. Second of all, it gives us a sense of who these people are, what are their strengths, and there's all different kinds of assessment. I love the Greek temperament. So
yes,
what is this temperament? I argue in my book that the Greek temperament is the very first, and for your audience, I don't have to explain all that because, I think your audience gets it. But I explain that this is the first assessment test out there. Hippocrates came up with it in 200 BC or whatever it was, and it's the most accurate. And so I'm a big fan in getting your kids kind of assess, figuring out what temperament they are. But there's other ones that apply in different ways. So I've tried to say, okay, let's do these assessment tests with your spouse and your kids. A, it's fun. Everybody likes doing that. And B, did I say A and B or 1 and 2, whatever? But
whatever it
A
is.
and B, it's that when they do stupid crap and your kids really piss you off, it will help you understand, why did they act like this? Why do I have this repeated problem with this kid? And you start seeing the God-given temperament and the other kind of attributes of their natural personality, and you can figure out how to communicate with them. So the relationships part is a lot about that innate personality. And, you know, Kennedy, we had twins. Our 11th and 12th were twins, our twins. They just turned 7. And it was there, Kennedy, that I realized, like, they eat the same food, they wear the same clothes, they sleep in the same room, everything's identical, but they're so totally different. And I realized this is a God thing more than a Conor thing. Like the nature is a lot stronger than the nurture. So with all of that, I've just become a big believer in the self-assessment test, not to overdo it, but it's fun and helpful.
Yeah.
And then lastly is discernment. And that's making decisions. So your audience will like a little Latin lesson here. So a decision is choosing between A, B, C, D. Problem solving is getting to the root cause of something. So let's talk about decision. Desire in Latin, something like that. It means to cut away from. If you hear cire, that's like scissors. A decision is cutting away from. An incision is cutting into. So it's kind of an interesting little word. And so decisions are choosing, do I get this minivan or that minivan or this 12-passenger van? Or do I take this job or that job? Do my kids go to this school or that school? It's choosing between A, B, and C. And I have found that a lot of stress between mom and dad come from like decisions percolating up and spinning around, not being very analytical about it. Mom is totally stressing out about it, texting everybody, researching things. Mom and dad aren't communicating well. And it just bubbles up, and we carry around the stress of indecisiveness. And we wallow in indecisiveness more than ever before in history. And, you know, when kids were growing up on the farm in the 1930s, there weren't that many decisions to make. Now there's an absurd amount of decisions to make. So we need tools to kind of help us get analytical and make those decisions. And then root cause analysis is just like, how do we figure out, why does this stupid thing keep happening? Why does my kid keep doing this dumb thing? Why does every time I talk with my spouse, we have a fight about this? Root cause analysis. All of these are business tools, Kennedy, that we can bring home and make a whole lot of headway. So there you go. That's the whirlwind tour of the 6-part family management system.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the minivan thing, because that's literally a decision we're having to make right now. We have one car. I work from home, so we do the one car thing for now. But our Honda Odyssey seats 8. And when we just came back from a cottage, and with all the luggage and everything, and with the kids and the dog, it was like a clown car trying to fit us all in there. So we're going to have to get one of those bigger vans come the winter probably. But yeah, those things are real. And, you know, there's a football player named, I think it's Alejandro, but it's Villanueva. He was an offensive tackle for he was the Steelers and for the Ravens, and he's 6'11", only 6'11", and he was a military man. He was born to like somehow it worked out that he went to West Point, because even though they were Spanish, his dad was part of some American thing, so he was technically born on American soil because it was a military base or something. Anyway, and so he found his way to went to Army, like to play football and go to school there. Free agent, walks on a sort of free agent thing in the NFL, and he's so big they'll work with him a couple years in the practice squad. Ends up being one of those, you know, $80 million contract protecting Ben Roethlisberger, cool. And then for the Ravens. Anyway, but he was on a podcast talking about how in the military, he said they're always so ahead of the curve because of how to assess what men will be good soldiers and how to reach them. And they say, because it's literally life and death, they don't concern themselves with saying, well, we wish it could be this way. They say, no, it is this way. And we have to adapt to what these soldiers need in order to succeed so that everyone else can succeed. They're like, we don't have the right to be attached to our own preferences about how society ought to be. It is the way it is. And we're receiving the young men the way they are, and they have their various triggers or whatever. So we can either work with that or we can fail. And that's something that I think a lot of Catholics need to understand. You know, we're traditional or traditionally minded Catholics. We are living in a world where I wish it was more like Little House on the Prairie. I abhor all these modern things. I want to, John Senior said, take a shotgun to your TV. I'd love to take a shotgun to all my technology.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because everyone's connected. I tried to get rid of my cell phone for a year. I did it in 2021, and I'm walking around my house with my laptop by my ear on a Teams call. And I'm like, this is stupid. Like, I can't force the rest of the world to adapt to me. I've got to find my way through. And God will give us the graces of state, because he placed us in this time. He placed us in this time, just like he placed us Christians in the early part of Christian history in Rome, when it was all pagan and whatnot. Just like he placed the various Christians today who are being persecuted in different places. We have our own particular crosses, and that is existing in a technocratic, fast-paced, non-family oriented world. And we still have the responsibility to forge a way through and adapt.
Beautiful. Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's, I think, accepting the reality that's around you and then building from it. When I was talking about that architect idea, that's kind of a big thing for me recently, because an architect has to look at their natural environment. Like, are they building something on the beach, in the mountains? Yeah. What's the climate? Is it in the snow or the desert? Like, these kinds of things. And then there's no excuses. They can't say, well, I just designed this building, but it doesn't fit on the beach. No, they're paid to consider their environments. And so we sort of have to do the same thing, Kennedy, of saying, this is the world we live in. Mm-hmm. And our teenagers might have cell phones, and there's pros and cons to that. And there is YouTube, and there is porn sites all over the internet. And like, we have to accept that we have to handle and manage and orchestrate and build the best systems possible to keep our families on track to accomplish our mission, which is ultimately to get all my family to heaven as quick as possible. So yeah. Anyway.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's really the Catholic way, though, too. I mean, the heresy of we should call it. Sorry, I've just got a call coming on some other thing here. I'm just going to hang up on it. You probably can't hear it, but I can hear it. Sorry. The heresy of Puritanism is there's no grace. So therefore we have to basically become Amish, and everyone has to basically wear a garbage bag. It's like Islam. You've got to completely take out the possibility of there ever being a temptation towards lust by pretending that beauty doesn't exist. And it's like, no, God created beauty, and it's totally wonderful for men and women to be attracted to one another, for a woman to have a physique that is attractive to her potential husband and so forth, and whatever, for a man to have the nice gray in his beard that makes his wife go crazy. And exactly, I think you have a little bit right there. You have less than I do, and you're older with more kids. I got to get some Just for Men or something like that. But the point is, the grace is there because we're not called to be like artificial robots. We are called to be fully human. To basically, and to use a silly term, we're called to be fully alive. We're called to, there are good things in nature. There are good things in the world. And it's our job to sort of go through the things that are traps and not fall into them, and have the virtue to withstand them, because we can't have these artificial barriers at all times to everything. It's when kids are little. Yes. You put a lock on the sink so they don't drink bleach or whatever. But at a certain age, it's like, you just can't drink the bleach. You have to understand why.
I tell you what, man, you're saying it perfectly. And I got, believe it or not, now, even with this, just a little bit of gray, I got 2 grandkids, and my 2 oldest are married, and they have kids now. And thank God they found great Catholics, to marry.
Yeah.
But, as the kids get older, I guess I got 5 or 6. No, let's see, I got 7 or 8 teenagers, or older, teenagers and older. Yeah. And, it's hard that you like, how much do you kind of rope them in?
Yeah.
How hard do you hold on to the leash? How much do you let that leash kind of extend out? When do you let them, how late do you let your 17-year-old stay out with his friends?
Yeah.
When do you let your kids date? Like, it's, these things are hard. These things are hard questions. And I don't want to try to tell people, I always kind of joke around. It is not for me in this well-ordered family system. People always want to know something like, well, when do you let your kids watch violent movies. Let's say like Lord of the Rings, they cut off 1 million heads, you know, in Lord of the Rings. Well, how old do you let your kids? I'm like, you know what? That's not the question. But the question, you need to ask the question, what are your own standards for something like movies or digital, you know, involvement with your kids? What I choose for Mike, by the way, like, you know, and you'll see this, I was way stricter on things with my first couple kids, and it just loosens over time because the younger kids are aging up, you know, but I don't want to tell people what their digital policy should be or what the dating policy or courtship policy should be for their kids, things like that. The key, all I'm trying to do is a very modest thing. I want families to ask the question and be very intentional about the question and very intentional about the answer. And I want them to put pen to paper and write these things down and reassess it, you know, every so often, reevaluate it, change it, evolve it. Because if they're doing those things, Kennedy, they're going to get it mostly right. And that's why I call it well-ordered, like the well-ordered soul. It doesn't mean perfect. It doesn't mean always happy. It doesn't mean always joyful. But if you're trying to do these things with some semblance of structure and purpose, your family's going to be pretty much well-ordered. You're still going to have problems. Your kids are still going to have problems. They're still going to fall into different temptations. You and your spouse are still going to argue. But, you know, so there's a lot of imperfections in my family. But the more I live these principles I go around preaching about, I can feel us becoming more well-ordered, and then happiness can kind of result from that.
I'll say one last thing, and then I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we'll end here. There's our priests run a boys' school where most of the people that are in our parish go to. Most of the kids send their kids, some from the States too, because we were talking before we came on, I'm not too far from the American border, so we got a lot of Michiganders that come up to the school. And it's a boys' school. They don't have Wi-Fi. You know, they've got a lot of discipline, all these kinds of things. And some of my buddies, their kids go to the school, and they were lamenting one day about, well, you know, because they went to Quebec for a thing, and Quebec has a younger drinking age, 18 years old. It's 19 in Ontario. Okay. So some of the boys might have bought a couple beers,
which I probably prefer. That's probably
well. They were lamenting it, and I laughed, and I said, so the teenage boys with no girls around, with no cell phones, around priests, and like, you know what I mean? Like in a school, like they had like a couple beers. I was like, this is a dream. This is
great. It's perfect.
That's what you have to get upset about. This is, you know, it's like have a little perspective. And they were kind of like, oh yeah. I'm like, this is fine. Like you guys are,
you know, I've always thought like, why is it that in our country, an 18-year-old can drive a tank and blow crap up?
Yeah.
And they can't drink a beer. I mean, that just makes no sense. Right. So, but anyway, that's a whole nother issue, but yeah, that's a funny little example of parents getting bent out of shape about it. There's a lot worse.
Give yourself some slack. It's like, okay, so the kid enjoy a little Molson. It's like, he's going to be fine. Anyway. Okay, this has been wonderful. There's a lot more. There's a ton more, obviously, and that's why people should get the book. And again, I'll or sign up for coaching. I'm sure it's very useful. It's something that my wife and I, especially as things heat up, we're going to have to consider something like this in the future. Where can people find your stuff?
Wellorderedfamily.com. It's pretty simple. Wellorderedfamily.com. And so it's the simplest thing to do is come there. Thank you for you're putting that up on the screen. And there's a family assessment test right there. Yeah, you're clicking on it. And that's fun. You can take this little thing. It takes you 5 minutes and you kind of see where your family has like strengths and weaknesses according to this 6-part system. And then you can sign up for a free consultation with one of my coaches, my certified coaches. And they're going to simply for 30 minutes talk to you or your spouse or both about where's your family and what were the results of this little test. And then we might be able to just provide some free tools that can help you, or talk to you about group coaching or some other webinars that we have. We have a video program that kind of teaches this stuff. So the idea here is like, let us just talk to us, start a dialogue. And if we can help, we will. And if we can't, we won't.
Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have the link for this. I will, if you go to his website, wellorderedfamily.com, everything is there, the book, the thing. So I'm just going to put the link for that. And at the top, I'll just show people quickly on the air here. Actually, if you look at the website here, on the main page, rather than me putting multiple links underneath, I'll just put the Well-Ordered Family one. And then here is This, by the way, and I'll make sure I put a link to this. If you use the coupon code Kennedy30, I may or may not get a kickback. Can neither confirm nor deny. And so we all win. You can confirm because you're the CEO of TAN, but that's it. So ladies and gentlemen, check that out. And if anyone's wondering where they can hear more of my stuff, they can go to my Substack, meretradition.substack.com. Right now, going through some works on the kingship of Christ, so well needed in our age of political insanity and trying to understand up from down. And lots there as well. My new book on the charismatic renewal is coming out soon. There's a pre-release on there for the members as well. So there's lots going on. And Mr. Gallagher, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
It is a pleasure, and God bless your everything you're doing, Kennedy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll talk to you soon. This has been Mere Tradition, and God bless you all.